Nurturing space for innovation, creativity, and academic freedom. This is the University institution in various niche areas. Grounding itself on the needs of national development, UPLB cultivates well-rounded and critical leaders who are ready to lead breakthroughs and innovation. Through its industrial and academic partnerships, UPLB propagates its gains to advance inclusive development in various sectors. An educational institution that upholds honor, excellence, and public service.
A center of knowledge, innovation, history, culture, and biodiversity of the Philippines, Los Baños. UPLB found its home at the foot of the legendary Mount Makiling in Los Baños, Laguna, a short distance from Laguna de Bay, the country's largest lake. It has its beginnings in 1909 as the UP College of Agriculture, a tent school for a handful of students. A year after, the Forest School, or what was to become the College of Forestry, also set up its home. In 1972, the UP College of Agriculture and the College of Forestry, that had by then become renowned institutions, were granted full autonomy as the University of the Philippines, Los Baños. Instruction, research, and extension in agriculture and forestry in the country took root and flourished in UPLB. Through its strength in these two fields, UPLB established niches in medicine, natural resources conservation, environmental science and management, human ecology, food science, economics and management, public affairs, and development communication. It drew its strength in the arts and other fields of science, from harnessing its expertise and human resource in the biological, physical, and social programs with international universities in food security, biodiversity conservation, and development. To make graduate programs more accessible to professionals, UPLB offers them off-campus School for Agriculture and the Environment in Mindanao, the country's food basket, in order to help build the knowledge capital that the country needs to attain food security. Instruction in UPLB is enhanced by a strong and vigorous engagement in research and public service that enables it to produce knowledge and generate technologies and innovations that promote sustainable living as well as for it to know what they need and to help shape policies in the country. UPLB's reputation as a graduate and research university was formed through the continuous aspiration for excellence and the mutual reinforcement between instruction, service, and extension. It brings in partnerships with local and international universities and provides mobility to faculty members, researchers and scientists, and students, and enhances their competitiveness. Instruction, research, and extension and public service in UPLB reflect the dynamism, honor, and excellence that its forebears set as a standard for its leaders to aspire for.
The world is in a constant state of change now more than ever. It's a world that requires resilience, flexibility, and innovation to overcome challenges amidst shocks and disruptions in an ever-changing world. Guided by compassion, an openness to working together, and the daring to seek out breakthroughs, UPLB constantly pushes for relevant research, establishes academic and industry partnerships, and cultivates creativity, critical thinking, and innovation. To keep up with the fast-changing world and to strive for inclusivity in development, UPLB seeks to level the playing field and expand avenues for acquiring new knowledge. Process in vastly different learning conditions. It is expanding its academic programs and supporting initiatives to create a conducive learning environment. To address the growing complexities of modern problems, it is taking on challenges in food security and sustainability, and coordinating research efforts to direct the university's resources toward critical research areas, making sure that the university-generated knowledge can reach its intended stakeholders, contribute to public good and social welfare as it continues to work with the local government and the community to address their most pressing needs. Amidst its engagements, UPLB remains as one of the top regional and global universities in development, as a producer of new approaches that minimize the cost and impacts of future shocks, and by honing leaders committed to knowledge creation, innovation and cutting-edge research, and public service. future-proof.
We would like to acknowledge the presence of our esteemed guests and participating colleagues and team members for today's office assessment and strategic planning workshop. We also welcome the participants who are watching via Zoom as well as the official Facebook live stream. We would like to kindly remind all participants that we will be releasing a survey form that you are required to fill out in order to receive your e-certificate for this webinar. It will be released towards the end of the program. Ladies and gentlemen, you may now be seated as we finally begin.
Again, good morning, everyone, and welcome to the UPLB Office of Scholarships and Grants Annual Program Assessment and First Strategic Planning Workshop here at the DAP Conference Center and Hotel in Tagaytay City.
The theme of our three-day conference is F.O.R.G.E, Future-Ready Opportunities and Responsibilities for Growth and Empowered Scholarships and Grants in UPLB. Part of this is the first OSG webinar entitled Just Wanna Have Funds, the future of scholarships and grants in higher education institutions in the new normal. We will be featuring 2 international speakers and 1 representing the UP system. Before anything else, I'm Isabella Nadine L. Jimenez.
And I'm Mark Kevin L. Movillon, and we are your hosts for today. Let's proceed to our program. May we request everyone to stand for the singing of the Philippine National Anthem.
All right, and to officially kick off this morning's event, we are pleased to have with us our very own Assistant to the Vice Chancellor for Student Affairs and UPLB OSG Director, Assistant Professor Jickerson P. Lado, to deliver the welcome remarks.
All right. Live na tayo. Are we live? Good morning, good morning. Good morning to everyone. This is the first OSG webinar that is actually this is the first hybrid. Like, we're doing it live at the same time we are doing it physically, and then there is a virtual session. So if there is anything that would happen, please forgive us. This is our first time, but let me greet now. That means it's welcome to everyone, especially to our international speakers. Dr. Akim, thank you very much. Dr. Christy, Sir Richard Gonzalo, thank you very much for allowing us to hear some of your thoughts about our plans for scholarships and grants in higher education institutions. Okay, so again, we welcome everyone. This is actually part of F.O.R.G.E, and that has been mentioned as the future-ready opportunities and responsibilities for growth and empowered scholarship grants in UPLB. We are very supportive of we are very thankful for the support of our Chancellor Camacho, our very hardworking and determined Vice Chancellor for Student Affairs, Dr. Janet Silva, our OSG staff and OVCSA staff who have been working behind this. Thank you very much for all your hard work. The students, no, and the whole UPLB community, they actually believe and they actually support the things. It wants to understand the global move to actually assist our university students. What is it that we're actually doing in the university? Is it at par with what others do, no, globally? And how do we now share that locally? We want to also understand what best practices to actually improve on in terms of financial aid, financial advice, and assistance. And then let's see how else can we get those local efforts, no, shared to everyone. So today, let us together forge the future of higher education institutions, scholarships, and grants. So good morning. Let's have a great day. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Sir Jeter, for that very energetic welcome message.
Now, we would like to hear from our very own Dr. Janet H. Malata Silva, the UPLB Vice Chancellor for Student Affairs, to give her opening remarks.
Chansey Dong Camacho, EBC Person Lado, OSG and OBCSA family, our virtual attendees. I think we have 19 million virtual attendees. And to our very respectable and hardworking resource speakers today who will be properly introduced later. President Akim, Dr. Christy Smith, and of course, AVP Chard. Isang mapagpalang araw po sa ating lahat, a pleasant webinar after more than 2 years of navigating through the pandemic. And what better way to do so but by having a very meaningful discourse on efforts to fortify the provision of scholarship and grants in higher education institutions. As we prepare for, if we are not yet in the new or next normal, we need all the fresh and trailblazing ideas we can get to get through this together. We hope to have a meaningful exchange of insights as we attempt to achieve more collaborations and maximize every available opportunity to ensure that no student will be left behind. My sincerest appreciation to all of you for your hard work and initiative and for keeping an open and big heart to share your work and passion with us. Padayon po sa ating lahat. Good morning, Ton.
Thank you so much, Dr. Silva, for that very inspiring message.
And now, to give his inspirational message, let us welcome our UPLB Chancellor, Dr. Jose V. Camacho Jr.
Affairs, Dr. Janet Malata Silva, to Assistant to the Vice Chancellor for Student Affairs and Director of the Office of Scholarships and Grants, Assistant Professor Chickerson Lado, to the entire OVCSA OSG team, for growth and empowered scholarships and grants in UPLB, or F.O.R.G.E. A F.O.R.G.E is a place of creation. It and then shape into useful tools. In much the same way, this workshop will be the same. The ideas, experiences, and learnings of the participants will be taken and used to create a framework for OSG's policies, actions, and decision-making. As UPLB's overseer of It is critical that the OSG's vision, mission, and goals and objectives are geared toward future-proofing and future readiness. The particular service that you provide is one that must remain accessible to our students, regardless of whatever shock or disruption may occur in the future. However, following industry's best practices and trends, acknowledging weaknesses and shortcomings, and deriving at flexible ways of adaptations. In your case, the OSG must ask and answer questions such as, how are other top universities of flexible learning and hybrid education on our service delivery? In answering these questions, we must be frank and honest with ourselves. Only through honest self-reflection and assessment we cannot afford to stagnate. These are challenging times we live in now, and we must either adapt to the rapid changes or be swept up in the oncoming tide. That said, I have full faith lead to an OSG that is future-proof and future-ready in service to the scholar ng bayan. I wish everyone an engaging and productive workshop. Maraming salamat, parating mag-ingat, at mabuhay tayong lahat.
Thank you very much. That was a very motivating and inspiring message from the UPLB Chancellor.
This conference was made possible to lay the solid grounding for future-ready and future-proof programs and services of the Office of Scholarships and Grants. As the overall chairperson of this event, let me share to everyone this program aims to craft the vision, mission, goals, and objectives of the office. Perform a SWOT analysis of our current implementing projects and services, gearing towards digital transformation and online processes. And finally, to plan a future-proof and sustainable programs and services of the office for the next decades to come.
Today, we will be mainly featuring 3 talks from our esteemed and outstanding speakers whose topics are all relevant to the objectives of our event as discussed earlier. Again, we would like to remind everyone that there will be a survey form that will serve as your attendance and the only way to receive your e-certificate for this program. The link will be released towards the end of the program. We are doing a bit of a rearrangement of our program. So we will move on to our first guest speaker, who will be presenting their talk on providing scholarships and financial aid, advice, and assistance to university students. This will be discussed by our second speaker, Christy Manette-Smith, Manager of the Financial Advisory Services Department in the University of the West Indies. Meet people where they are is the philosophy that drives Miss Christy Manette-Smith. Her passion and skill lies in the area of client services and stakeholder relationship management, which she holds as a key to aspect of student and donor engagement. She believes in the importance of adaptability, tailoring approaches, and leveraging partnerships in order to provide the most relevant and meaningful interventions in all areas of service. Throughout her career, she has created pathways for educational progress and has facilitated student development, specifically through the procurement of financial donations to assist students. Her 15 years experience at the UWI has informed much of her service orientation, having worked at all staff levels, supporting student life, student access and development, including the mature student demographic. During her time as a lecturer of international relations at the UWI, she was able to explore the needs of students, gaining a more holistic understanding of the requirements teaching and learning from the UWI.
Good morning, Ma'am Christy. You can now share your presentation.
Good morning and thank you. I'm sorry, we're having a bit of a technical delay, so I must apologize for that.
No worries, ma'am. We understand. Thank you for taking the time to be here today.
No problem at all. Okay, I think we're on there. Good morning to all. I hope you're all hearing me. And I'm really heartened to be here this morning. I watched your introductory video and it certainly made me feel quite warmly welcome. I think I need to visit the Philippines soon. Maybe I'll do that later on this year. But while you're experiencing morning in that part of the world, here in Trinidad and Tobago, it is 10 p.m. at night. But I am still very thrilled to be on this session and to be able to share what we do here at the UE St. Augustine campus. So just to provide some context, the University of the West Indies is a regional university. Our mandate is to serve in the advancement of Caribbean community and to sustain its development. So we are located in the Caribbean and Trinidad and Tobago, specifically in the English-speaking Caribbean. We are here at the St. Augustine campus, which is in Trinidad and Tobago, but we do have sister campuses in Barbados, Jamaica, and we are also sharing satellite locations in 14 Caribbean territories. So that really puts us well in place to bring the Caribbean together and to harmonize efforts across the Caribbean. As a matter of fact, the University of the West Indies, the whole premise of the university is based on a Caribbeanness, and the glue is our Caribbean culture, a very warm people, very friendly people. And much of our thrust towards Caribbean development and sustainability and survival in this fast-paced and globally changing world is really to ensure that our strategic plan is aligned with that whole thrust towards Caribbean development. And so if you were to take a look at our AAA strategy, recently we were looking at it, of course, with a view to redesign, but during the period 2017 to 2022, the University of the West Indies set on a path to ensure that we provide access to our students, that we align ourselves with world trends and regional development imperatives, as well as to ensure that we are agile in all that we do. So that more or less defines much of what we do here at the Financial Advisory Services. And so let me just dig a little deeper into where we are located. Now, what I've found is traditionally, you would find the Financial Advisory Services Department or unit located within the student bursary section. However, a couple of years ago, our university made the move to incorporate financial services, scholarships, bursaries, and financial aid into the Division of Student Services and Development. This division is a student-centered division comprising 8 departments under one division who work harmoniously to support our students, in particular with their non-academic needs. Now, what this essentially says is that financial aid plays not more than just a role of disbursing funds or assessing need. We adopt a student service orientation in the administration of our function. And that is quite critical in terms of dealing with students who are faced with challenges. You must have that deep-rooted sense of empathy. You must have a connectivity beyond the classroom, beyond the finances, to really hear what our students are saying without them saying it. So this is where we are, financial advisory services. This is just a look, and I hope one day you are able to visit our campus here in Trinidad and Tobago. But this is what our office looks like. We are on the 2nd floor of this building. And to go straight into today's presentation, because I know you're really eager to hear more about what we do. In Trinidad and Tobago, our students have multiple sources of funding for their tertiary education programs. And let me just start with our UE headquarters. The UE headquarters is located in Jamaica, and there's an office that attends to procuring scholarships for students using the alumni base, which are scattered across in different countries in the diaspora, and they raise large sums of funding to support students across all 4 campuses, which includes funding initiatives like a gala called the Toronto Gala, which is held in Canada, sometimes in the US, and they bring all the alumni together who pledge to support students. And these scholarships help hundreds of students move forward towards their goal achievement of ultimate graduation. They also procure scholarships from other just affiliated persons, not necessarily alumni, but persons vested in the development of Caribbean students. So they're able to route the funds to the various campuses based on application criteria, and of course, based on sometimes based on the need of the students. So they work very closely with the offices, which are the sister offices to mine at the various campuses. In Trinidad, we also have our government providing assistance to students. It's the government assistance for tuition expenses, GATE. And GATE provides assistance for all tertiary level accredited programs. Students are able to access this fund based on their household income. So based on your household income, the baseline you can get is 50% funding. If you are earning below $5,000 US a month, then you may get 75% funding. And if you are earning just about $1,500 US a month, the government will give you 100% funding towards your tuition. So this lays the context for what we do here in financial advisory services. So because most of our students are actually tapping into those accredited programs and they are being given government subventions, we are able now to cater to these students and fill the gaps where the GATE funding may not have been able to based on their household income. So we provide that sort of financial aid through scholarships and bursaries. We work very closely with our donors. It's privately sponsored scholarships and bursaries. We work with local donors, members of the campus community, members of our alumni base. We have individuals who are just, again, vested in the development of our UWI students, and individuals who may have had an interest in coming to the UWI and felt, let me just give back to these students. So we work very closely with them to set the terms and conditions for access to these scholarships and bursaries. And I'll tell you a little more about it as we progress. Our financial aid programs also allow students to tap in to some sources of income, which I will also go into a little later on, that can help them get by, especially in emergency situations and situations of hardship. So in short, we provide financial aid, financial advice, and financial assistance. And we do so as a means of empowering our students. We want students to discover their power, and we believe that providing this type of financial support will alleviate their concerns in that area and allow them to focus on their academic, attaining academic excellence. A little more on scholarships and bursaries. So our scholarships, we offer just about 350 scholarships and bursaries. We've worked very hard to procure them. I mean, this is a very interesting time that we're dealing with right now, that we're facing. And so we try to manage our donors as we move through this COVID pandemic period, which is sort of winding down now. But our scholarships and bursaries have played an extremely important role during this period to help students to generally get by. And so our scholarships are administered through our office, but they are selected and governed by a campus committee for undergraduate awards. This committee comprises our deputy principal, which is like your vice president of the campus. It also includes our director of the division. Every donor sits on our committee. They are a bona fide member of our selection committee, and they actually, most of them attend our selection meeting, as well as the Guild of Students. They are represented on the committee, and representatives from each faculty. So a deputy dean may be nominated to serve on this particular committee. Our scholarships are available to undergraduate students. We have another office that deals with postgraduate scholarships. Our scholarships are also non-tuition based. It means that when students tap into these awards, they do not necessarily have to use them to pay their fees, their tuition. They can actually use it to purchase books, to purchase equipment, to pay for their housing accommodation. And so they're not bound to the tuition-based type of award. We offer from 1,000 US, which is about 5,000 plus TT upward, and all our applications are online. Now I'm just setting the tone. I'm setting the stage for what we're really going to dig deeper into in a short while. So when our donors come on board, we work with them to develop criteria. And what we really try to do is get our donors to embrace the concept of financial need. So while we are an academic institution, and of course a GPA requirement is required for students accessing our scholarships, we do ask our donors to consider putting as part of the criteria a financial need element, as well as to also perhaps include the student's involvement in extra and co-curricular activity. We believe that it's important to raise the ideal student, the whole student, and so we encourage our students to get involved in the 92 clubs we have on campus or off campus. We encourage our student athletes as well to sign up for our scholarships. We have a few for student athletes so that they show that they're doing more than just the academics to access these awards. And our donors range from, like I said, individuals to institutions and corporations. What we have done is we have worked to procure donors who would service students from rural areas. So we have funding, about $2 million in funding for students who live in a very remote area, and that allows them to traverse to the campus. It allows them to access internet in their area, to get the services required through financial assistance via these scholarships donated by our donors. We also have donors who come from schools, secondary schools, and their past pupils associations. They raise funds to assist students who may be attending the UWI who would have gone to their school previously. So we are on a thrust to sort of set a trajectory for students coming from the lower levels, the lower schooling levels, from primary into tertiary, into into the the tertiary level education domain. So we're trying to set that trajectory to allow them to really maximize their potential when they get here. Let's look a little bit into our financial aid programs. So we have 3 financial aid programs, one that's called the Adopt a Student program, the Hardship Grant, and then we have Relief Aid. Let's take a closer look. Our Adopt a Student program, and this is something that my director holds very close to her heart, you know. The Adopt a Student program offers students $400 TT per month as a stipend. Students must come in, apply, I would assess their case, and then deem whether they should receive based on their level of need. But this particular program is actually funded by members of our staff who voluntarily contribute from their salaries every month, as low as $20, as high as $1,000 or more, towards supporting our students. And so we have been able to assist over 600 students over the last 2 years via this particular program. We also have a hardship grant, and this is available to all levels of students. This provides funding for students in crisis situations, students who may have medical circumstances, or students who may need assistance with their tuition. They must have a GPA requirement of 2.0 in order to access it. And it is available to all levels of students. In our capacity as a financial education, we offer a financial literacy workshop series, actually, where we bring on board alumni, members in financial sectors to help help the students navigate through budgeting, retirement preparation, and so that they are well equipped to manage their funds as they move through their degree program. And so let us sink into the core of what we really do and what we have been doing for the last 2 years. So what we recognized at the onset of the COVID pandemic, which all caught us by surprise, was that we were shifting from a group of students who were financially challenged, which we knew about, to a group of students who never had the reason or cause to access financial services. For the males in that group, it became a bit testing because we found that for the males, it was a bit of a challenge for them to come and ask for assistance. So that required a lot of finessing. But what we started to do is engage in a number of outreach activities. Instead of having the students call us, we started to call them just to tap in to see how they were doing. So let me share with you what actually took place during the last 2 years. What helped us to adapt to this VUCA world that we're living in? We sought to deepen collaborations and partnerships. So we engaged in a lot of cross-campus activity, working with our student bursary section, aligning ourselves with them and more or less explaining to them the value of financial aid and the time sensitivity of financial aid so that their processes will not stall the disbursement of funds to our students. So what they ended up doing was reallocating funds. What they ended up doing is realigning their staff to meet the needs of our department because the students were coming to us for assistance. We also partnered with the Guild of Students. The Guild of Students, because the students were not on campus, they had some resource funding that was set aside for on-campus activities, and they donated those funds to assist towards assisting students who were impacted by the COVID-19 pandemic. We were able to help hundreds of students through that fund, and it continues up to this day. With each guild coming on board, they have donated a significant portion of their funding towards assisting students. What we do is once we receive the funds, we engage our financial aid processes to ensure that integrity, accountability, and transparency is maintained in the process and that the right people receive the funds, the right students, the ones who are most in need. We also worked with stakeholders and our sister department, our careers department, we worked with them and their external partners, most of which were corporate Trinidad and Tobago, to redirect funds from that were designed for internship programs towards and convert them into grants for students in need. So instead of having the students come into their workplace at that time in early 2020, they were not able to facilitate students in that way. So instead of just having the money sit, they converted it into a grant. And so our students, our financially challenged students were able to benefit from these internship funds. We also worked with our local financial institutions to ensure that we synergized efforts. So for example, we had to convert our disbursement processes from checks and cash disbursements to ACH disbursements, direct deposits from the university into the student's bank account. And to facilitate that, we had to work very closely with our local banks. Some of our students had never even had bank accounts. And so what we did was we tapped into the key personnel in these respective financial institutions and worked with them to arrange a quick time setup of appointments for the setup of bank accounts for these students so that they could access the funds as needed. And I think what is important here, and I perhaps forgot to mention it before, is the time sensitivity of financial aid. Financial aid is not something that you sit on. When a student approaches for assistance, we have to get those wheels going. And so we need each department to come on board. And so linking up and synergizing efforts across the financial institutions and within the campus community allowed us to do that. We also enhanced our outreach activities. We engaged in pulse checks, bi-weekly calls to all our students who we know were having financial need problems, and those who we would have heard through the division's email system. We would check with them to ensure that they were doing well and to actually find out whether they would need any funding support via the COVID aid fund, whether they were in need of grocery items, whether they were in need of any other additional support that we could give them coming out from the divisional departments. We also worked very closely with the Deputy Principal's office on a drive towards debt cancellation. So the COVID pandemic collided with a retraction in our government funding, the GATE funding I spoke about earlier. It also collided with mass retrenchment in Trinidad and Tobago and across the region. So a lot of families were unemployed, parents unemployed. And so students were struggling to meet the fees, their tuition fees. And so what we did was we received a listing of all the students who had funds owing between $2,000 to $5,000. We called each of them, we interviewed them and determined whether we could write off their debt. We're happy to say that we were able to do that for a majority of the students, allowing them to register and of course, improving our retention rates in the process. We did similar action for students who owed between $5,000 to $10,000. And for those who owed in excess of $25,000, we reached out to some financial institutions who offered preferable rates on student loans. And we referred those students to these financial institutions so that they could make their fees and again, come on board with us the following semester. We engaged in a food drive. What we realized that as we dug deeper into the pandemic was the food insecurity challenge began to be very real for our students. So while they were reaching out for funds, much of those funds they asked for was just to put a meal on their tables. And so we reached out to our local Rotary clubs and other NGOs, student bodies, different student groups to amass hampers, vouchers, food cards, and we went to each student's house delivering those hampers and grocery items during the pandemic. It really was a very humbling experience to see what some of our students are facing. And that's why I say, you know, when you go into financial aid is just not about aid. It's really about having that empathy and an understanding the needs of our students and going beyond the finances. And so the food drive allowed us to really see the scope of what our students were facing. It also generated a lot more information. So coming out of that interview to determine whether the students were in need for meals, we learned that there were students who were experiencing tremendous mental health issues, and we were able to then refer them to our counseling and psychological services unit. Students were experiencing academic challenges as a result of all the other financial challenges, and we were able to put them onto our student life and development department. So we worked, we synergized our efforts across the division in the area coming out of the financial need revelations. We also worked with the Deputy Principal's office to determine which students required internet access. The Deputy Principal's office and the executive management team, they worked very closely with a local telecommunications provider to provide what they call MiFi devices, which allowed students to access internet even in the most rural area. We called those students to determine whether they were indeed in need of that particular device. And we were quite moved by some of the comments that we heard coming out of the interview. About 60 to 70% of our students were actually borrowing internet from their neighbor. Of course, I'm saying borrowing, I'm using the term loosely because it brought a reality to us that these students were facing tremendous hardships while trying to basically get their degree, just basically attending classes. And so the MiFi device allowed them to tap into internet access to engage in their online teaching and learning experience. We also learned that students were buying very low value data plans, using that data plan on their phone and then connecting that plan to their tablet or device via a hotspot in order to access their classes. And this was another revelation for us and justifying definitely the need for more financial aid and access to these types of devices. Coming out of this, we were also able to work with a donor to procure, I believe it was just about 100 laptops for our students who did not have laptops. We had students actually doing their classes in their car, on their phone, because some students had no electricity. So the campus was sensitized to some of these realities that our students were facing. I'm going to move on now. So the next area, we re-engineered our programs and our processes. So everything, just like we're doing right now, everything became virtual. So we had our virtual financial management workshop, which would have been face-to-face previously. We introduced live support sessions for scholarship applicants because we were having a challenge actually getting students to apply. Our application numbers were decreasing, which would have had a direct impact on our donor funding. So we introduced live support sessions, which is currently ongoing actually, where students can come on, they can chat with us, they can ask us any question. We had them fill out their scholarship application. We put them onto the respective legal bodies to have their documents notarized, and that really worked well in terms of connecting with our students. I believe that they not having a warm body to speak to or to connect with was a real issue for students during that period, and I think the live session sort of countered that action. We realigned donor funds to meet the student needs. So earlier I would have spoken about our scholarships and bursaries and our criteria that we set with the donor. So we enforced and really worked closely with our donors to ensure that the financial need component was embedded in all scholarships and bursaries that were available, because we recognized that no matter what academic merit score you had, there was an element of financial need that our students were facing that needed to be considered for the best, the brightest, the best, and the most financially challenged to access these types of awards to take them through. And finally, strategic alignment. During the period, we did a gap analysis because we recognized that there were certain members of staff who exhibited greater competency in certain areas, but we're not getting to the touch points in students. So we shifted our approach. We used a staff competency assessment to determine which staff members would best meet the needs of certain services that we provide. And we were quite successful at that, I'm happy to say, which is still ongoing. We had our staff get in touch with students, a lot of dedicated follow-up action, weekly follow-up action, as a matter of fact, ensuring that their documents were submitted, touching with them to ensure that they received their funds. So this really made for a more robust operation here at the Financial Advisory Services Department. We also partnered in the recruitment function. So we became a core part of the marketing and communications recruitment drive for new students, appearing on television, newspaper articles we would put out there, introducing students, letting students know about the opportunities available here at UWI to access financial aid via scholarships and bursaries and via our financial programs. And I think up to this day, we have become an integral part of the whole recruitment function, testimony to the fact that financial aid is really not something that operates in a silo, and that many departments need to connect. We need to connect with the departments and all have the same headspace as we forge forward. Just a bit of data. When we looked at the relief aid aspect during the COVID pandemic, these are some of the areas that we found popping out at us as to why students were asking for assistance. Some of them were no longer employed. Some were on hall and were given concession fees on their hall fees. Some of them, like 2% you have here, their parents were deceased or died during that pandemic period. Others, 37%, had other financial challenges. There was a reduced household income. 22% of our students experienced a reduced household income. Students who were affected by the pandemic, they were self-employed and they could no longer service their businesses, so it had to shut down. And then we had our international and regional students who could not return home. And this is where we tapped into our reserves to support these students. And as we wind down, the question, of course, is how do we forge forward? And so what we have found, what worked for us here, if we were to take it from a lessons learned approach, one of the first things is we have to, as a campus, embrace a student service orientation in our practice. We must, well, I shouldn't say must, it would be worthwhile for all student campus bodies, offices, units to understand what it means, or to remember what it means to be a student, and more so, what it means to be a student who might be experiencing financial challenges. So we have had several meetings with our stakeholders to sort of encourage them and sort of bring together that type of thinking so that when we route our matters through them, they understand the sensitivities involved in financial aid. Secondly, empathy towards student circumstances. We all have our own dispositions. We all have our idiosyncrasies. One of the main reasons we did the realignment of our staff was based on the fact that some members of staff exhibited more empathetic traits than others. And so we aligned those members of staff with the direct one-on-one contact that we required for our follow-up action with students. Building robust clientele relationships. I would say that many times when I look at the outcomes of some of the projects we have undertaken, it is because of those clientele relationships that we've forged with our partners, both internally and externally, which allows us to do more for our students, give our students more, and ensure that our students are happy and they don't have to focus on those other non-academic services needs, and really just stay ahead with their progress in their degree program. Active follow-up and follow-through, that was integral during the pandemic period. We had to adapt, we had to switch, and we were able to follow up on all our programs, all the related processes as part of our programs. We had a real team, I shouldn't say a real team, but we had a team that was dedicated to follow up and follow through action. And finally, reflecting, reviewing, and revising our systems and processes. It was important for us to take a step back, to look at what we were doing, and to examine it with a critical eye. And after we were able to do that and engage in ideation processes, we were then able to look collaboratively at how we can revise our systems to meet this volatile world that we're living in, and to really forge forward successfully with our students in training. And so that brings me to the end of my presentation. I do hope that you were able to snap some nuggets of wisdom out of some of what I shared here today. And of course, I am open for questions at the end of the session. I want to thank again the committee, everyone on the committee, your Vice President, Student Services Affairs, for allowing us to share this information all the way from Trinidad and Tobago in the Caribbean. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much for that very enlightening talk. I think we really learned a lot, especially with how to take a holistic approach towards financial aid for our older students, especially during the time of COVID, which we definitely felt a challenge, especially the students themselves.
Thank you, Manager Christy. So we will have a Q&A at the latter part of the presentation. But I would just like to say we very much appreciate that presentation. I actually have a lot of questions, and I'm very delighted of your presentation because we saw a lot of similarities, differences, and challenges. So I don't want to go out of the script, so I'll proceed. Thank you, Manager Christy. Our next speaker, let me introduce to you. He is the president of the International Association of Student Affairs and Services, or IASAS. He has been the Secretary General of the German National Association for Student Affairs from 2002 to 2021. Between 1995 and 2003, he was a General Director in the Ministry for Education in Hamburg, responsible for vocational training, professional schools, and further education. Between 1985 and 1995, he was a general manager of the BBJ Consulting Company, working in the fields of professional education, social, youth, labor market policy, and European funding. From 1980 to 1985, he was also a general manager of the vocational training company in Berlin. He also has voluntary functions as Vice President and President of the European Council for Student Affairs, or ECSTA, from 2004 to 2008. And at present, he is the President of the IASAS, or the International Association of Student Affairs, since June 2015. Between 2012 and 2015, he was a member of the NASPA International Advisory Board. Since 2008 to 2016, he has also been a member of the Supervisory Board at the Universities of Wuppertal and Marburg. He holds degrees in National Economics, Business Studies, and Education. Without further ado, ladies and gentlemen, let us welcome President Akim of the International Student Affairs and Services Organization. President Akim.
Okay, thank you very much, Mark. It's a pleasure to be here in your conference. It's had some problems to enter, but now it works. And I'm going to share as well my presentation. I'm talking about the future of grants and scholarships. And okay, I will try to share my presentation. Okay. Wait. There we are. Okay, wonderful. Okay. Okay, great. Okay, you asked me to talk about the future of scholarships and grants in higher education, and so I'm going to try to give you a short overview about the systems, and I'm going to the German system or European way of student support, students' financial support, and give you some figures about that. I'm starting, you can see the outline here, I'm starting with the question, why do students need support? And I think in the future, there will be more knowledge-based societies and economies in the future. And this is, so we need more leavers or absolvents of higher education institutions in the labor market. And it's on the other hand as well a question of economic growth and social justice. And that means it's necessary to widen access to higher education in generally for everybody who could be talented to enter universities. And that means especially we have to win those students which are especially first generation students without academic family or background or lower income need. They need financial support. And so the question will be, in which way is the access to higher education systems organized or supported? You have different models. On the one hand, you have the European welfare state model. On the other hand, you have where you find linguistic models, and the specific figures of the European welfare state model are that they are trying to enable social participation and social justice on one hand. The family background shouldn't be an obstacle, and you find in many countries a state responsibility for student support, and on the other hand, and this is I think one figure as well of the European way in the Bologna area. That means those 40 countries which are integrated in the European higher education area, there you don't find tuition fees, because higher education is seen as a public good in public responsibility, and this should be open for all of them which are able to study. On the other hand, you see the Anglicistic models. There very often education is seen as a private investment, and that means as well you have private financing or ultimately by loan finance, and not so much support. It's good. There are exceptions. You can see it on the following graphic. For example, if you're looking to the United States, you have a system of public grants. This is called the Pell Grants. You have, on the other hand as well, loans and scholarships, but scholarships are individual. But for example, on the public grants, very often there is, I've got the right to get it if you are feeling specific advantages. And I will go on this a bit later. In Germany, you find, as in many European countries, Italy, France, Sweden, you have a public grant system or mixed systems between grants and loans. And sometimes you find others financial supports. For example, in Italy, you have there are grants given to those students which are living far from their home, and you have other supporting systems as well, because indirect, for example, in France, in Germany, they are funding by the state dormitories, for example, which are open to students with low income, and especially, and so you have a different way of financial support between direct financing by public grants, loans, scholarships, and others, or on the other hand, by indirect or non-direct financing of students, not individual, but by funding the food, the catering services, on the other hand, the dormitories. Okay, if you are looking if you are starting comparison between grants, loans, and scholarships, you can see that there is no repayment by grants. By loans, you have, of course, a repayment, which could be a big problem in the future if students have left universities and are working on the labor market, and you have scholarships, but they are, as I told you, individual, which are not repayable as well. Then sometimes you found with grants, I talked about is the individual entitlement. This is, for example, in France, in Germany, in Sweden, and many other countries, which you can realize, and I will give you the example afterwards, which will be the conditions to realize the individual entitlement for getting grants. So I'm coming to the instruments of student support in Germany and Europe, and you have to see that there is a common understanding in the society that parents are obliged to pay the living and educational costs of their children. Actually, the monthly livelihood costs are about 982 euros, which parents are obliged to pay if they are able to pay. If they are not able to pay, this will substituted by the public support system. And this is, for example, the federal financial aid system. It's called BAföG, or on the other hand, by merit-based financial aid scholarships. But the federal financial aid system is an individual entitlement if you are filling the preconditions, and this is one thing. On the other hand, I talked about it, the indirect public support for students. We have student services, student housing, dining, counseling services, which are financed as well by the students, but on the other hand, by subsidies by the public authorities. And so we are trying to make enable or comparable access for all students with higher and lower income to universities. Then you're on the other hand to find university services, orientation, academic advising, and of course you have external structures like public health insurance, sport facilities, the community support, and other things. If you are looking to the special German system, it's comparable as well in France or in some different Austria, other European countries. It's strictly needs-based financial aid, and it depends on the parental income. This is a precondition. I talked about the maximum amount. It's 931 euros. In average, it has been in 2020 574 euros per month for those which benefited by this financial support. It's a system of 50% grant and 50% loan, and there is no 0% interest. And the loan system means maximum loan 10 euro in total. For example, I can give you an example. If someone is subsidized or financially supported in totally, he will realize for the whole study about 53,000 euros, and he has only to pay back 10,000 euros. So it's less than 20% which have to be paid back. This is very attractive for those which are studying, and it's this maximum stays the whole life but you have only to pay it back in 20 years, but you can see the figures afterwards. When does the full amount start? Up to 23,500 euros per rental income. This is a net income. That means all taxes, all insurances and so on are reduced. And then you have, for example, one parental part, father or mother, and one child That means 23,500 euros. You get the full financial support as a student. This ends about 40,000 euro. Then it's reduced, and it's reducing itself in steps by 10 euro, for example. So you're starting with 931 euro in maximum, and you're ending with 0. So it's reducing step by step by 10 euros. It's only for German citizens and legal residents. So this means, for example, students with migration background, they have the opportunity to be financed as well if their parents have lived 5 years and worked 5 years in Germany. So we have a big share on international students, especially which are coming from Europe, which parents are living a longer while in Germany, for example, from Turkey, from Eastern Europe, and so on, which are financially supported as well. And it's only for full-time students. That means if students are in employment, on the other hand, they are not able to be benefited because the system focuses on those students which are full-time students. If they are working less than 20 hours in the week, they are recognized as full-time students, so they are able to get as well another financial, or next to the financial support, they can realize own income up to actually 450 euro a month. That means about a bit more than 5,600 euros if you are reducing the income by the taxes. Age limit actually is 30 years for bachelor students and 35 for master students, but actually this specific Federal Training and Assisting Act is in the Parliament in some kind of relaunch, and maybe they are changing the age limit up to 40, we will see. Usually you get it for 10 semesters, maximum are bachelor and master, but you find as well exceptions. For example, if you are studying a bachelor for 4 years and a master for 2 years, and it is recognized, then you will be financed as well 12 semesters or 6 years. And students which are financially supported, they can ported to study abroad. There are no extra allowance starting from the first semester to the end. In 2020, there were only 16% of the students benefited. This depends on the borders of the parental income, but this will be changed and increased by 20% starting in October. That means that we are trying to reach more students which could benefit by this financial support. Okay, I can give you some other figures concerning the attractiveness of this system, state system, BAföG, it's called, or Federal Training Assistance Act. The repaying starts of the loan share starts after 5 years grace period. So you have the possibility to work a long while and to save some money to pay it back. Then I talked about it, the total debt is limited to 10,010 euro. And you have to pay back in 77 monthly rates of 130 euro the state loan. And the maximum means 20 years of repayment. That means if you, for example, because the repayment is income dependent, if you are lower income, you can see it here up to 1145 euro, or and then you are not forced to pay back. And if you are in this time, in this 20 years, if you are not filling enough months to pay back this rates, then the state will finish the repayment, and so we are not forced to pay it back if you are not realizing income which will you enable to pay back. There are no reductions for good grades. We had it in former times, but in one of the changes of the system, this was finished. Then we'll find other forms of financial support. This is more the scholarship system. We have, for example, merit-based financial aid. This is for those students which are filling specific conditions. And this is granted as well by foundations with political affiliation. And it's based as well on parental income, comparable to our National Federal Training Act. And but it's higher, it's about 1160 euro. And there are actually 4% of the students are benefiting. And you find the Germany grant system. This is our 300 per month. You can get it as well, not if you're benefiting by the merit-based financial aid, but if you are benefiting by the National Training Act. And this is paid by 50% by public and by 50% by private foundations. And this achieves actually about 1% of our students. And then you find federal loans in advanced semesters. That means students which are, for example, preparing themselves for the last examinations. They can get 300 euro per month, 24 per month, and current interest here is about 0.75%. This as well, it's achieving about 1% of the students. Then you have private student loans. Depending on marketing as interest rates, which are offered by private banking and safe. What do you call it? They are comparable to the bank system. Here you can see a short overview in this graphic about the different systems and how many how big the different budgets are. You have the grant loan system. The maximum of financial support per month is about 931 euros. I talked about it. There is no interest rate, and actually there are 548 students which are benefiting by this, or which is previewed with the change of the parental income borders starting in October. Then you have the BAföG bank loan. There are not so many students achieved scholarships. The Germany scholarship program, state education loan, and you can see that the national training system and training act is the biggest one among all these financial support systems you find in our country. Then we have organized since many years a national research about the living conditions of students. It's starting every 3 or 4 years. The last one has been in 2016 because of the pandemic situation. We didn't ask in 2020. And it was then started again in 2021, and the results will be presented perhaps end of this year or the next year. And you can see that only 6% of the students in Germany take loans. This is comparable to other European countries because you'll find, on the other hand, the financial state support systems which enable students to finance their studies during their stays at the universities, and or the parents are able to pay. And you can see the state education loan is only about 1%, KfW loan about 4%, and loans from other banks only 1%. You can see the average rate. I'm sorry, with BAföG, this is an old figure. It's talked about more 550 or 40 actually, and you can see the majority of the students are paid by the parents, 87%, not fully, partly. They always have a mixed financial situation. They have their own earnings from employment, and they have, for example, as well the national training system, BAföG, or other funds which they are benefiting from. Okay, so so that's the reason why the majority of students are free from debt. Only 18% have debts. This corresponds with the benefiters from the national financial support system, about nearly 80%. And you can see that in average, the indebtedness of students with debt amounts 10,000 euros. That is not so much, and you can pay it back during your life if you are working and earning some wages and money and so on. Okay, then the graduates' indebtedness in comparison to other countries, you can here see as well. The typical debt, for example, in the United States is about, has been in 2016, these are figures from 2016, has been $25,550. In Australia, it's 22. $100 in Australian dollar in average. In England, you have British pound, 77,500 pound is a large number. In the UK, in Germany, it's 10,000 euro. You have you find in those countries interest rates as well. And the repayment is income based in Australia and England, but the typical years of repayment is a very long while. For example, you can see in Australia it's between 8 and 12. In the United States, we didn't find it out, and the maximum years as well. In England, it's about 27 years. That means you're repaying nearly your whole working life after having left universities and education systems. And the maximum of years in England is about 30 years, so it's a long while. In Germany, it's 20 years, but I showed you these are 77 rates, monthly rates on a slow level with 130 euros. So if you're evaluating the systems of long life repayment in USA, Australia, UK, the mortgage in US is forced to pay at first. For example, people are obliged to pay the repayment or to organize the repayment before they pay, for example, their health insurance. This is a big problem for many people which have a high debt. They are not able to pay for their or against their illness, because they have to pay back the typical debt or the typical loans they with which they financed their studies. So if you are comparing those, we have UK, I talked about it. It's a very big problem in UK that many people have a high rate to pay back, and there's a high indebtedness, especially in UK as well. You find as well. So the conclusions, if you are looking to the, if you're comparing and talking about the future of the scholarships and grants in higher education, if you want to widen access and social inclusion of students to higher education system, it's from my opinion, it's really necessary to establish national financial support system, which are focused especially on those which are representing families with low income and lower educational background, especially first generation students. And so this will be, so I would say that especially grants or scholarships based on a legal claim, which is like a title, you can realize this will be the future of the financial support system at the end. So I thank you very much for your attention. And if you have some questions, I will stay, of course, for those questions. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for that wonderful presentation, President Akim. and our deep thanks and gratitude. We owe you one because we know it's what 3, 4 a.m. there. It's in the wee hours of the morning, as well as to Manager Christie, because we have a big time difference from the Philippines to Germany and Jamaica. So really, thank you to the both of you because you are awake. You still presented despite the time difference. So we really thank you very much for that. So our next and last speaker, as they say, save the best for last, and the last but not the least, uh, are the one of the big boss of the University of the Philippines system. Uh, he is the Assistant Vice President for Student Affairs and the Director of the Office of Student Development Services, or OSDS. AVP Gonzalo coordinates student affairs programs across the campuses of the University of the Philippines system. Since 2013, he has initiated reforms in student affairs management in UP. AVP Gonzalo was a member of the technical working group that formulated several student financial assistance guidelines for the Unified Financial Assistance System for Tertiary Education, or UNIFAST board. He currently represents UP in the ASEAN University Network, or AUN. AVP Gonzalo has extensive experience preparing tourism development plans for local government units. He has worked with the Tourism Infrastructure and Enterprise Zone Authority, or TIEZA, in preparing tourism project evaluation guidelines, and has assisted the National Commission for Culture and the Arts, or NCCA, on culture-based development and governance initiatives. He currently teaches destination development courses in the UP Asian Institute of Tourism, or AIT. His research interests include tourism development, gender and tourism investment planning. He has also initiated extension projects on disaster and crisis recovery in tourism for the UP AIT. AVP Gonzalo is a certified public accountant. He completed his BS Business Administration and Accountancy and MS in the MS Finance in the UP College of Business Administration. He is presently a Doctor of Social Development candidate in the UP College of Social Work and Community Development. Ladies and gentlemen, let's now welcome our very own, the Assistant to the Vice President for Student Affairs of the University of the Philippines System and the Director of the OSDS, AVP Richard Gonzalo. Sir Richard.
Morning, everyone. I'll just share my screen. Okay, so I hope you can see my screen and my voice is clear. Okay, so good morning, everyone. So I'll be presenting some reflections and some approaches on how to design responsive and empowering scholarships and grants in the next normal. So a number of these insights and basically recommendations are based on our experience over the years in redesigning our student affairs system in the University of the Philippines. UP accommodates about 54,000 students every semester, okay? And almost all undergraduate students are already studying for free since the enactment of the free tuition law in 2017, okay? Now, we're now transitioning to the next normal, okay? And a number of policies are underway in order to shift the way we deliver our courses and our academic programs this year and the coming years, okay? So to guide everyone regarding some of the changes we can actually incorporate and consider, okay, in designing scholarships and other financial assistance programs, okay, I'll be presenting a number of things that we have to look into before we lay down the framework for our student financial assistance system. My presentation is divided as follows. I'll be introducing the concept of VUCA first, okay? And of course, the idea behind being responsive and empowering in the context of a VUCA world, okay? And then we look into our student financial assistance system, particularly in the University of the Philippines, and some of the key takeaways that may be useful in planning for our revised or basically reformed student financial assistance. Now, we have to understand that the next normal is VUCA. When we say VUCA, we have to compare this first with our idea of normal before the pandemic. Our idea of normal basically lays down a structure on how we will admit students and how are they going to achieve their academic goals in the university. It starts with application and of course the admission process when our students take in or enroll in courses over time. They study for several years until they graduate in the university. This is the setup that we're used to, and this is the setup that guided how we designed our student financial assistance system. So how we want the situation to be, of course, we want everything to be in place. Despite the diversity, we want everything to be in order so that we are able to achieve our academic goals as well as our organizational goals. But then the pandemic happened, and of course, we went through a number of disruptions in the past years. Okay, we're now living in a VUCA world. Okay, not everything seems to fit. Okay, it may be confusing. There used to be we used to see everything as a puzzle, but now it looks like a maze. Okay, some of us do not fit in, or we do not feel that we fit in. And of course, there's a feeling of discontentment and frustration, even if we have the systems in place to assist us in this present situation. We have to recognize that in the university, okay, there are several learning setups or delivery modes that are available to us. We have our face-to-face or in-person learning, and then we had our remote learning during the pandemic. We're now transitioning to blended learning, which is basically a mix of in-person learning and of course some components that will be delivered remotely. Before 2020, we were used to the face-to-face learning modality, okay, where students come into our classroom, they are in our campuses. Eventually, we recognize that this will not be the next normal in the coming years. Okay, we're now looking at blended learning as one of the modalities that will assist us in achieving and facilitating the delivery of programs so our students can achieve their academic goals. But then we still are open to the idea of remote learning in case of public health emergencies and disruptions. The challenging part here is that while we are promoting blended learning as the key modality in the coming months, we may have to shift to remote learning based on the disruptions that we will experience. And these disruptions can come from different sources. Okay? This may be due to typhoons, which, for example, we recently experienced this year, where a typhoon affected some of our campuses during the summer months. So that was unusual, but then that has to be expected again. Okay, we still have our public health emergencies. Okay, and of course, other anthropogenic crises and disasters that we have to take on as we move forward. Of course, in the process, we might lose people along the way. It can lead to a mental health crisis for our students as well as our personnel and staff. So the VUCA world will be our reality, and we have to embrace this so that we are able to adjust, basically make the necessary arrangements to respond to this particular reality. But how do our students feel in this VUCA situation? Here are some of the questions that arise when we ask students in a state of chaos. They may ask why they are here. Do they fit in the program that they enrolled in? Do they have control? Are they in charge? Do they know where they're going? And oftentimes they ask, why is it too difficult for them? Okay. So these are some of the things that we have to consider. We're not just managing a financial assistance system. We're actually trying to manage also the emotional and mental state of our students as well as our staff. So in a VUCA world, these are the things that we have to consider. But then when we talk about VUCA world, it's not just chaos. VUCA stands for volatility, uncertainty, complexity, and ambiguity. And these are 4 distinct challenges. Each challenge has its own attribute. When we talk about volatility or a volatile situation, we know how it will end. It is predictable, and we know how it works. But then there's some question regarding the duration, making it unstable, even though we know what will be the outcome of that particular situation. Anything can escalate. Okay, we may know that a storm can lead actually to closure of classes, but because of the intensity, we might not know when this will end. We also experienced this during the pandemic. Complexity, on the other hand, is a very different challenge. We know how it will end, but we don't fully know how it works. The situation basically leads to a predictable outcome, but it can be confusing and overwhelming. And there are parts that are missing, so we have to learn what these are. In an uncertain situation, we don't know how it ends, but we know how it works. Okay, so there's an uncertainty if what we're doing is actually working. Okay, we have an unpredictable outcome, we have information, but there's doubt if it will help us in addressing this outcome. And of course, in an ambiguous situation, we don't know how it ends, and we don't fully know how it works. The situation is unpredictable. It can be confusing and overwhelming, and a lot of parts are missing, and we don't know what these are. Now, given the situations, I already presented the 4 distinct challenges. But to address this, we can actually look into it as a challenge that will require certain interventions. In a VUCA world, I present to you 2 distinct aspects where we might have to reconfigure. One has something to do with the design of our program. The other is all about agency, or basically how we recognize our human intentions and our ability to control the situation. Let's look at the program design first. When we refer to our program, we refer to the systems and the conditions to allow clients and organization staff to respond to a particular situation. We mentioned a while ago that in the VUCA world, there are 4 distinct challenges. These are not just chaos, these are 4 challenges. And each type of challenge demands 4 distinct responses. So in a volatile situation where we know how it ends, we know how it works, okay, the duration of the chaos is actually what concerns us. So the usual response that we can do is actually to stockpile, save, and make sure that we have enough resources that can last. But in an uncertain situation, we don't know how it ends, but we know what will work, what can work. Probably the best response would be to reduce the ongoing uncertainty, and in the process, try to understand and basically control the situation with new and shared information. In a complex situation, we know how it ends, but we don't know how it works. So restructuring things so that they may work better can be the best response for this particular situation. In ambiguous situations, we don't know how it will end. We don't know how it works. So learning through experimenting, trial and error, basically trying to get your to appreciate the situation so that you know what will work can actually be beneficial in a VUCA situation. Now, this may seem a lot for an organization, but in a VUCA situation, these are the things that we must be prepared for. So in a VUCA response would entail that we recognize such responses. And in redesigning our programs, we have to take note, what are the elements of VUCA that we have already addressed? In a number of cases, volatility and complexity can actually be the attributes of VUCA that we can immediately address because we know the expected outcome. Okay, but for uncertain and ambiguous events, that's a situation that we have yet to face, and this will require that we try to learn, try to adjust, try to experiment, and take stock of our experience. This means that our situation will require an organization that is more dynamic and is open to learning. Now, the second part of the VUCA actions would require recognition of agency. Agency roughly would mean the person's capacity to determine and make meaning, basically try to appreciate a particular situation. But from that appreciation, we try to look at how, if we are capable of purposive consciousness and reflection so that we can actually design an action to respond to this particular case. In agency, okay, we look at our ability to understand and comprehend the situation. From that situation, we should be able to take control so that we are able to identify what needs to be organized, what resources will be needed. But an implicit assumption in agencies that we have that ability and we trust our ability to do so. It's not just a system that has to work. It's also the person that is able to understand, able to control, and has the ability and can trust his or her ability to take on this particular challenge. Now, why are we saying this? Because in a VUCA situation, we may have a very good design on how to respond to our students. But if our students, okay, are in a situation where they feel lost, they don't know where they are in a state of chaos, they have doubts if they fit in, and it's very difficult for them to move forward. It might be very challenging for us to reach out and basically design a program that will also help them in the process. Now, the good thing about human agency is that it is socially mediated, which means it has to be delivered by another person. It will require contact with the person as a human being. So recognizing that person and validating their experience is actually a step to basically recognize human agency. And agency is nurtured with human dynamics. That means mechanistic approaches might not necessarily work. They may work to ensure our organizational success, but if we want our situation to be more empowering, we may have to incorporate human dynamics so that our humanity is actually recognized in the process. So in this process, we look at how empowerment can be delivered in VUCA. And one of the frameworks that we can actually use is to introduce how we can actually let our students lead the lives that we choose to. Okay? In this particular situation, we recognize that the VUCA has a flipped version, which is the VUCA prime. When we look at volatility, we must be able to allow our student to see beyond the disruption. Disruptions can be setbacks, but we have to direct them to where they should be going. In uncertain situations, learning is actually crucial. Taking stock of what we know, to stop, to look, and to listen can actually be beneficial because we do not yet know how everything will end. In complex situations, we have a lot of moving parts. So advising probably or interacting with students on how can they make sense of the chaos so that they can simplify this and come up with a pattern on how to approach it is actually crucial. And in ambiguous situations, agility is actually crucial so that they can move quickly to apply certain solutions to see what will work and determine to take control of the situation. So when evaluating our program, we may have to ask ourselves if our program has elements to allow persons to make sense of how to lead their lives in a VUCA world. So I'm emphasizing here that it's not just a system and the programs and the patterns and processes that we have to focus on. Do we have spaces that can be empowering and recognizes the agency of our students? At the end of the day, we want to push forward a program that is responsive and that actually recognizes or nurtures empowerment. For one, in the university setup, students come to the university to achieve their economic goals. In a VUCA world, it can be chaotic, but it's a real situation. Chaos is disruptive for the student as well to the organization because our offices are the ones tasked to address that particular situation. So we have to recognize VUCA and basically look at ways on how can we respond. But we also need to recognize that when dealing with our students, we are dealing with human beings. Students actually have human rights. And basically, this means that we put humanity at the center and we have to protect their integrity as human beings. The rights that we recognize creates freedom and provides a chance to a person so that they can be what they want to be. in a vocal chaos situation, the situation can be depriving and a lot of times disempowering. So why do we need to be responsive? Why do we nurture empowerment? Because despite the chaos, we need to ensure that every student in our offices or enter our offices can live a life of dignity and a life that is worthy of a human being. Okay. So how do we apply this in our student financial system? Okay. Well, the VUCA world is our reality in this particular situation. So how can we design our system so that it fits our VUCA reality? Well, we can look at how we can make it more responsive and empowering for our clients and for our stakeholders. In the university, we can classify our financial assistance as follows. There are three broad categories. We have our scholarships composed of our UP awards and private scholarships where donors basically donate money, okay, to be awarded to certain students. We have our student grants, such as the learning assistance grants that we have. We also have donations from donors. And of course, we have our Adapt a Student program. We also have several subsidy programs for specific needs. And of course, we have our loans, which include our cash loans and tuition loan. What we need to understand is that how these student financial assistance create benefits for our students. Scholarships provide incentive. They sustain the quality of performance. It's different from student grants because grants try to fulfill or meet a particular need because a particular applicant lacks certain resources to fill a goal for a given academic term. For loans, these are just ways to defer the payment of a present obligation. We can view scholarships as reward and recognition for good work, for excellent work. But scholarship, student grants are forms of social protection. It tries to bridge the minimum so that our students have equal fighting chance to be able to realize their academic goals. And of course, we have loans, which provides the chance by deferring our present obligation and also gives us time so that we can attend to some of our activities. Now, with this, we can try to see if the structure or our system of student financial assistance is responsive. We go back to how we make programs responsive in a VUCA context. We mentioned specific strategies for each element of VUCA. In volatile situations, saving up is actually a strategy, but that won't work in uncertain and ambiguous situations. Okay? Restructuring can only do so much to reduce the complexity. But if this situation is uncertain, ambiguous, or volatile, we may have to rethink our strategies. There are some elements that I would like to highlight to make our programs responsive. Number one, this is regarding the tools that we use to know about our student. This is basically covered in how we assess our student so that we can make sense of the chaos or the VUCA chaos that they are in or where an applicant is in. From this situation, we can now assess the type of benefits or the assistance we will be extending to our student. We have to consider the amount, the quality, and even the criteria to grant the benefits. The impact of granting benefits is crucial so that we can actually support them based on our intended objective. But student financial assistance goes beyond the money and the impact. We must be able to deliver and deliver it in such a way that we are able to respond to this particular situation. The availability and adequacy of organizational resources is crucial. Budget would cover the money that we need, but we also need to look at partnerships and other sources so that in situations where we need to extend assistance further, we may have a source to expand our coffers. Finally, we have our systems and technologies that we can use, and we have to check if these are useful in different VUCA situations. Next has something to do with the overall structure of the organization. Are we updated with the present situation, because in a VUCA world, everything changes. Are we willing to learn as an organization? And are we ready to adapt to the different situations that the future will offer us? So to be responsive in a VUCA situation, our student financial assistants may have to consider 4 things: the student assessment tool that we're using, the benefit structure that we might have to reconfigure, the available the amount of organizational resources, which goes beyond money. It also includes the human resources and the technological resources we may use. And of course, the culture, the willingness to learn and to adjust should there be other disruptions that we have to face. Now, once we have set up our organization, then we may have to consider, do we have spaces that can be empowering to our students? Again, I have to emphasize that when we talk about empowerment, we have to look at agency. An agency is socially mediated, which means it is delivered by persons, it requires contact by a person, and it is nurtured with human dynamics. In this case, we are already set in place what we can consider so that our students are able to flip the VUCA world so that they can go beyond it to disruption and ensure that they are able to respond also in this particular situation. The question here is, do we have spaces in our programs to allow our students to make sense of how to lead their lives in a VUCA world? And there are 2 ways on how to incorporate this in our student financial assistance program. We may have to look at our client services, where we interact with our students so that we can be able to reach out to them and feel how it is to become human. And of course, the advising part, where we assist our students. It's more like a hand-holding session so that they are able to flip in a VUCA world. So client services and advising are actually crucial in this particular situation. So to summarize, what we see or how we envision a VUCA adapted student financial assistance system, we have to recognize that in VUCA, a lot of things might change, but these changes are actually challenges which demand specific responses. We can mold our organization so that we can respond to these particular cases, but it's also important to have empowering spaces to recognize that our students are also human beings with certain needs and would need some form of assistance in order to move forward. So the takeaways from our lecture are as follows. The VUCA world will be our reality in the coming months, in the coming years, probably in the next few decades. And the disruptions can come from different sources. It can be public health emergencies, there could be typhoons, there could be anthropogenic disasters, crisis, security concerns, and of course, activities within the family, the household that can affect the way we perform in our classes and even in our campuses. Because of this reality, we have to adjust. We may have to consider how our student feels and how a staff feel in a VUCA context, because these feelings are actually what guides us when we make certain decisions. There's a state of chaos in terms of, am I here? Do I fit in? Are we in control of the situation? Do we know where we're going? And why is it too difficult? So the proposal here is that we respond by reconfiguring our organization, but we reconfigure it by also incorporating spaces where we can empower our students. In order to make our student financial assistance responsive, we have to consider our tools that we use to document and to analyze our applicants, our students, so that we may understand what they're going through, the benefit structure that we have to redesign, and the organizational resource requirements that will be needed in order to basically respond to what we find out in our student assessment tool. And of course, we have to face the reality that some things might change. So our culture should be able to assist us or lead us to make sense of the situation and to adapt in a VUCA situation. We also need to look at spaces where we can actually interact and nurture human dynamics with our students. So there are these two spaces where we can actually do that. We may evaluate our client services to see if we are able to give chance to reach out to our students, and of course, advising to help them lead their lives in a very chaotic situation. At the end of the day, we want to do all of these things because we have to recognize that we are dealing with human beings. Despite the chaos, we need to ensure that every student can live a life of dignity and a life that is worthy of a human being in the university. So thank you for listening. Should you have questions, I'll be accepting them later in the open forum. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, AVP Richard. What I like most about your presentation is the focus on the human dignity, the human rights, and the overall human aspect. No, that's a very good criteria to include. Ate Isa?
All right. So now that we have listened to all three wonderfully enlightening lectures, all of which are I think we all have great takeaways with regards to how we can improve our operations here at the Office of Scholarships and Grants. For now, we will be taking a 15-minute health break for both our participants and our speakers. But after that, we will also accommodate a very short, brief question and answer portion. So for now, let's rest our eyes, take a few stretches, or perhaps if you are at home watching this webinar, you can have a short water break so we can replenish ourselves and be ready to ask some questions later. To all our participants as well, take note, please check our chat box. We will be now sending the link to the survey form where you can give us your evaluation of all our webinars so far and sign up to receive your e-certificate. So please keep in mind that you need to answer the survey form in order to receive the e-certificate for this webinar.
In line with UPLB's thrust toward creating and strengthening partnerships between academe and industry, it is establishing the UPLB Agro-Industrial Park and Information Technology Park, or the AIP-ITP. Soon to become a hub for innovation and AIP-ITP will promote robust academe-industry partnerships. It will provide a venue for commercialization of UPLB technologies. AIP-ITP will serve as a training ground for university students, making them industry-ready upon graduation. Located in UPLB's Special Economic Zone, the AIP-ITP will offer that will generate business and employment for surrounding communities. Its designated zones for agribusiness, information technology, and research and development will become a haven for both startup and mature companies and government agencies, giving them access to the talent pool of UPLB and the surrounding universities. As an interaction hub of both research and industrial projects, it will bring and UPLB's expertise within reach of investors and business partners, leading to the creation of updated and relevant initiatives that will contribute to the growth of the agriculture, forestry, and fishery sectors, promote the adoption of technology, stimulate innovation, and accelerate human capital development. Continuous pursuit of academic and research excellence with the growth and opportunities of the industry, The AIP-ITP is envisioned to enhance development and catalyze dynamic social transformation in the region. And a stronghold for forest and nature conservation efforts. The UP Sierra Madre Management Office under UP Los Baños. The Forest Reserve is composed of 2 land grants in southern Luzon. The Laguna Quezon Land Grant, spanning 5,729 hectares along the boundaries of Real Quezon Pangil, Laguna. This biodiversity-rich area is home to more than 400 floral species, 121 of which are endemic to the Philippines, and holds 3.4% of the total endemic resident flora and fauna found to be threatened species. As a protected and managed forest area, the UP Sierra Madre land grants serve as living laboratories for foresters, agriculturists, and environmentalists. A living testament to the country's rich natural resources, the UP Sierra Madre land grants have the potential to spark conversations about and inspire action towards protecting forests to create safe, Baños and the UP system established the UP Sierra Madre Nature and Conservation Reserve. Part of this development is creating a network of 9 gardens for notable species in the land grants and an arboretum are envisioned to further forest restoration and nature conservation efforts for the Sierra Madre and the Philippine forests, and enrich research and learning for the community. With this
The UPLB Agora is our unified research and extension agenda, where we driven research and extension for development and innovation through systems thinking, solutions making, and future-proof paradigms. This agenda is a product of a series of consultations from stakeholders in the university. UPLB Agora will direct the path of research and extension as we address pressing challenges in food security, health, natural disasters, and governance. We have always been at the forefront of changing lives and help
At the center of UPLB Agora lies our research and extension priorities captured by 4 focus areas. UPLB shall ensure people's access to sufficient, safe, and nutritious food that is produced and traded through sustainable, just, and collaboratively defined agricultural systems. Anchored on the pillars of disease prevention and mitigation, environmental hazard protection and conservation, and resilience of ecosystems, pillars of human capital, environmental, social, and economic principles, this focus area seeks to lead in and facilitate the enhancement of stakeholder capacities. UPLB in promoting a culturally vibrant, safe, and economically thriving society. It will also guide us as we seek to enhance organizational capacities and promote good governance principles and practices. Based recommendations, active engagement, and inclusivity. Through our agenda, we want to contribute more vigorously to addressing the pressing and pervasive problems in the economy areas on food security and sovereignty, One Health, resilience and sustainability, and future communities and institutions. Defined by efficient systems and processes and inclusive development and innovation, our ultimate goal is a future-proof university, a future-proof Philippines, and a future-proof world.
And we shall do this with you.
All right. I hope you use the 15 minutes for a well-deserved break to everyone. I would like to thank all of our participants and guest speakers. We will now take a few questions from our audience and participants, both from Zoom and from here in the multi-level conference hall, addressed to our speakers. As I can see, we already have one question in the Q&A chat box. The question is addressed to AVP Gonzalo. Good day. It was mentioned earlier that there are tools to document students' concern in terms of assisting in the financial needs. At the same time, there are organizational resources to respond to these concerns. What specific tools are at hand, and how does the organization respond to these concerns? What communication tools and what feedback mechanism are being utilized? AVP Chard.
Thank you very much, Mark. Okay, so in the UP system, we have at least 6 tools that we can actually use to assess the situation of our students. Well, the most obvious one is actually the submission of application forms, to determine the profile of the student. The application forms provide us ready information declared by the student, which will actually be useful if there are actually attributes that we can where we can group our students to specific categories. This can be used most of the time for scholarship programs that has clear-cut criteria on who will be the beneficiaries of certain activities. Now, the more challenging part is actually the assessment test, which assign probabilities to our students. So this involves the criteria, and in UP we have we can assign probabilities to certain answers of a student to identify them or basically group them into specific categories. These probabilities are actually based on the latest findings from the Philippine Statistical Association, where we can assign a student to a particular income household so that they will be given priority when it comes to certain student grant or financial assistance. Another way to get to know the student, is actually the submission of a narrative documentation of where they are, how are they going through this particular situation. It's like an interview that will actually elicit more nuanced information about the circumstances surrounding the student. This can be challenging for the student financial assistance system because you are dealing with cases that may be unique every time you receive an application for additional information. In UP, this takes the form of an appeal, but in some cases, there are actually forms where a student submits a narrative of what they think about a particular situation. Another way to gain information about the student is through referrals, okay, or recommendations. In this particular case, you have another body who can actually exercise professional judgment or assessment in order to assess the situation. This is particularly useful in the grant of subsidies, especially those students who may have health concerns. In disaster situations where an application is actually cannot be readily submitted, okay, targeting them based on existing data can actually be used so that we know who the students are exposed and who will likely receive assistance for this particular period. And finally, before the pandemic, we still have we had home visits, which are actually useful to get to know the student, what they need, and basically to extend counseling to this particular to our student applicants. So far we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 approaches that we have in the university over the years, and we can reconfigure them again so that this can be more efficiently administered in the coming years.
Thank you, AVP Chart, for that very comprehensive answer. Okay, our next question will be coming from one of our participants here in the multinational level conference hall. Mr. Matthew Shena, what is your question?
Good morning. I would like to direct my question to Ma'am Christy. My question is, in the application for grants, we cannot avoid students who will falsely declare in their application forms. Is there a way in your organization or a system which will know if such applications will not be entertained, so we can avoid the abuse of the grants and scholarships that we are giving to students? Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you so much for that question, Sienna Matthew. Is that correct? Yes.
Yes.
Yes, thank you so much for your question. And it's an excellent one, actually. So one of the main pillars in our department is integrity, accountability, and transparency. And that is of primary importance, especially because we're dealing with funds that are donated by persons who voluntarily do so, because many of our donors, they do not ask for much in return. And so we have our application is required to be notarized by a public notary. So I should mention that we have 18,000 students on our campus, and it's an office of 4. So we have 4 team members attending to students. Our applications usually for scholarships and bursaries, it usually is in the range of about 1,000 applicants, between 900 to 1,000. It has declined over the last 2 years, but it's going to be, because it's going to be a tremendous job for us to authenticate that on our own. We require that students, especially when they're completing the income and expenditure form, that form gives us a clear idea of the household income, the expenditure, and we use a metric system to determine the level of need based on that. And we score that on a scale of 1 to 10, 10 being the highest need. So that has to be stamped and notarized by either a commissioner of affidavit or a public notary. Students are also allowed to fill out what we call our additional comments form. And that form allows them to explain their circumstances to us. And there are many times we know some of the students, so we do also conduct interviews. And so that's the kind of mechanism we put in place. Once a notary signs that, you're bound by law, that this is the truth that you have told. So that's how we deal with scholarship and bursary applications and the authenticity of it.
Thank you, ma'am. Thank you, ma'am, please.
You're welcome.
Thank you, Manager Christie. Thank you, Sir Matthew, for that wonderful question. Now, as the chair of the program and the moderator, I would also like to ask a question addressed to President Akim. I noticed in your oh, I think Sir Akim just left, maybe a technical issue. Anyway, I will just redirect my question again to Manager Christie. Uh, may I ask first if your university is a private institution or is it a government-funded institution?
It is a government-funded institution, and because it's a regional institution, there's pool government subvention across all Caribbean leaders. That I guess that's the beauty of it. But for the St. Augustine campus here in Trinidad and Tobago, we are adopting more of a business model to contend with some of the economic drawbacks we've been experiencing. So you'd find that we're engaging in a lot of grant proposal writing, moving more to innovation, and engaging more entrepreneurial activities as a university in our quest to really survive in this volatile period.
Thank you, Manager Christie. My second question, after me, Ma'am Isa will ask, but my last question is, when you are implementing your financial assistance programs, or not just the financial assistance, but all of the student affairs services related programs, since you are funded by the government, do you have some sort of memorandum of agreement between your institution and the national government, or is it automatically implemented because there is a law requiring to implement it without having, memorandum of agreement? Because here at UP, we have some programs with other government agencies which do require a memorandum of agreement, but we have, like AVP Richard said, for the free education in the Philippines, we do not require a MOA from the national government because it's already a Republic Act. So I would like to ask if you require a MOA, or is it because your law requires it, so there's no need anymore for a formal MOA or contracts, sort of like that, Manager Christie?
I do hope I answered this correctly, but I think we would have to go back to the historical underpinnings of our university, which was raised from a colonial background. And so the government from the very onset had a large stake in the University of the West Indies. And so each year they actually determine how much funding they give to us based on our expenditure from the previous year. So it's a given that they will fund the university, but what becomes in question, of course, based on the economic situation at a national and regional level, is the extent of funding we will receive. And so, well, over the years, we've seen some decreases in the funding support that we have gained. To circle back to your question regarding an MOA, I may have to look into that a bit and get back to you on whether there's in fact an MOA in at the university, but I am certain that the government is a vested partner in terms of financing our programs.
That's good to hear, Manager Christie. Thank you for that answer. Ma'am Isa Jimenez will also have a question directed to Manager Christie. Thank you.
Sure.
Yes, this is actually kind of refreshed in my mind when AVP Gonzalo discussed how to empower students during when they entered the VUCA world, which is, I remember that you also discussed this briefly in your presentation. And it really, what really stuck with me in your presentation is how your organization actually considers teaching students financial literacy, which I think really struck me because of course, our organization is very service oriented. So it's all about serving the students and providing them assistance whenever they need it. But as Sir Richard said earlier, we also need to give them empowerment or the need to let them take back control. So I was very curious, what kind of things do they, can you give examples of topics that they discuss in the financial literacy workshops that you offer to the students?
Yeah, certainly. Thanks for that question. And I think that is one of the key parts of the service that we provide. We want to make sure that while we give our students funds, we want to make sure that they understand how to successfully utilize those funds, how to apply it, and I guess not to get into mismanagement of funds. So some of the topics we look at is preparing a budget, just a basic budget to help them navigate, which would include them really assessing their lifestyle. We use our facilitators, our past alumni. We partner with our central bank, who they have a free financial literacy program. So we bring on our stakeholders to lead the workshop. And some of the areas they engage in is really to dig deep down and have the students explore the range of expenditure they may have, as simple as going to Starbucks, putting that as a cost. What would movie night cost? What would buying a McDonald's burger cost? And factor that into their living and develop a plan. Also very critical is retirement planning, because sometimes we wait until we're older, to start engaging in retirement planning. But we have found, of course, that the best time is if we can get our students to do it early on, 19, 20 years, 21 years old. So that is an integral part of our workshop, where we actually get them to map out cost of living over the next 20, 25 years to determine how much money they actually need to make now, what type of job they may need to have. So we align it in order to sustain themselves based on the rising cost of living, inflation, and so on. Another area we touch on is debt management. So we have had our facilitators speak to students about credit facilities, how to take a loan, what taking a loan really means, how to service a loan, how do you manage a credit card, because that's another very critical area. And more you find that the banks are offering credit cards to the youth in Trinidad and Tobago. And so we have to equip them with the tools to understand how to manage these funds. While the credit card is indeed useful, and we actually encourage students to take small loans, just very small loans, to build their credit rating as they move forward. In Trinidad, I am not sure if it's the same in your country, but in Trinidad and Tobago, if you go for a loan and you do not have a credit history, it's extremely difficult to access a loan. So we encourage them to take just very small loans if they can manage it, especially those who are employed, to service some of their debt and to build their credit rating in the process. That's just a sample of some of the areas. We also talk about stocks and bonds and how to invest, where to invest, looking at the quality types of investments. We then bridge that with the programs that you're into and what may be trending, food security, food insecurity, perhaps a need to go into agriculture. So we bridge it with some of our faculties and programs to show the correlation between what they're doing in their program and financial management. I hope that answers your question.
Thank you very much. That was very informative.
Thank you very much, Manager Christy. Last two questions. Sir Matthew will ask Ma'am Christy, and then I will have the last question to Sir Richard. Go ahead, Sir Matthew.
Hello again, Manager Christy. I just have two quick questions. The first one is, what is the estimated time of the disbursement of the grant or scholarship? For example, from application to the actual disbursement of the fund to the student's account?
Yes, that's a good question. So our processes are currently being revised, and I said that in my last slide. Sometimes we just have to step back a bit to look at how we can, re-engineer our processes to meet the needs of the student. I would say, before I go into scholarships, I would say that in terms of our financial aid grants, the financial aid that comes through our department, that is processed within 1 week. So a student can apply, have their interview done, and the processes get in train, and within a week to a week and a half, maybe, they would receive the funds in their bank account. Now, with respect to scholarships and bursaries, we are dependent on when our donors submit their funds. So we are in the process now of when our cycle is in train and we are getting to the end of our application period, and before we go into our selection meeting, which is usually about a month and a half after our application deadline closes, we start sending correspondence to our donors, letting them know, okay, you have committed with us for this year. We now need to get your funds into the department. Once we have the funds and the selection is made at the meeting, we send the nomination to the donor. The donor signs it pretty quickly. And once they sign it, then we are able to disperse the funds. In the absence of donor funds, we can have some delays up to maybe a month or a month and a half before a student is actually awarded. But we are working on it because that is an area that we need to improve the timeline for disbursement, which is heavily contingent on the remittance of funds by our donors.
Thank you, ma'am. And the other concern that I have
Sure.
in mind is being under the government, being a government-funded institution, university. In our case, there are really a lot of processes before funds or budget is given to our office, and it really takes a long time before we can provide financial assistance to students, and there that's where responsiveness comes in, the quick actions of our organization. And I just want to know if there are such bureaucracies also in your institution, in your university, that makes it hard to respond to students in quickly.
I would say this much to you. We had significant delays in certain departments. That was the end section of our processes. What was necessary, and that's why I spoke about cross-campus collaboration, was the need to hold these collaborative meetings with every stakeholder involved in our process, because we were coming up against significant delays because people did not understand the time sensitivity of financial aid. And so reaching out to them, we also had a switch in the headship in some of these departments, and those persons had a student service orientation. And that helped us significantly. And that's why I pointed that out at the end of the presentation, that a student service orientation, that empathy, that understanding of the fact that the student is facing a challenge and needs immediate assistance, that has truly helped us. In fact, we are on a drive now to reinvigorate that thinking across all campus bodies. So we're looking at going to faculty board meetings, carrying 1 or 2 students with us to share their testimonies. We're looking at having workshop sessions on student service, customer service, clientele services, to share with them, what our students face as a division, because our whole division, we work holistically. When I find a student who may be experiencing financial need, that student many times has some mental health issues. So I put them on to the counseling service, or they may have their financial problems are coming from the fact that they cannot support their accommodation fees. So I work with the manager of accommodation. We also sponsor students as well. If there are students who we deem as the student will not be able to make it, the division takes it upon themselves out of the budget to sponsor students. Now, the budget for our financial aid programs comes from 3 sources. 1, the Guild of Students for our emergency COVID aid fund. The second, from our staff members. And I saw you have an adopt a student program too at UP. So that was very heartwarming to see. And the third, from the university, the budget, it's built into the budget. So when we prepare our annual report, and that goes to the government, they look at what we are actually doing to help students, and that allows us to get more funding. It helps us to get more funding from the government, the more students we actually assist. So it works positively for us.
Thank you very much, Manager Christy.
Thank you,
Thank
Manager
you for your
Christy.
questions. Thank you for
very
your
much.
questions.
Now for the very last, please forgive me. Address to Sir Richard. Sir Richard, since we already implementing the universal access to quality tertiary education, RA 10931, and there's already a pending House bill for the mandatory giving of the government for the gadgets and internet subsidies. Do you think it is feasible, or is it viable, or is it high time to also suggest to Congress or implement, a universal stipend or living allowance so that all students in all state universities and colleges in the Philippines will receive a stipend, and not be applying anymore to our system, which requires a lot of requirements. Do you think that is viable? Is that feasible? What is your take on a universal stipend matter, AVP Richard?
So when we talk about stipend, we're talking about cash being given to our students. What we have to understand is that when we give our students cash, the cash is actually instrumental for a number of services. Okay, so even if you have cash but you don't have the services that you will actually use to facilitate, basically, let's say you need more dormitories for where the students can live in on campus. If you do not have enough rooms or beds, but instead give them cash, that's actually something that actually can be problematic. Okay, when giving stipends, there's always an assumption that the services are there, so we have to consider that that assumption is not always true. Okay, in this particular case, we may opt to look at other services that can actually be more beneficial for the student. More budgets for accommodation, probably subsidized set of meals. Rather than giving subsidy, they can actually access meals in a particular area, and in that case, they can actually have incentives to take on or basically have more nutritious meals while they are actually healthy in the university. Those are things that we have to consider also, because while money is actually an issue when providing these services, giving it directly to the student implies that they have access to these available services, and that's actually one problematic area that we are in right now. Okay, now we experienced this when it comes to the delivery of gadgets for this particular year. What we did not anticipate is actually the supply gap when it comes to the demand for the gadgets and basically the amount of students who will need these items. That's why we have certain delays, because the manufacturer will have to produce the gadgets first before they can actually give it to the students. So what can you do? There are a number of innovations that I think UP Los Baños already have. Learning hubs in strategic areas can actually be a more effective way, because students can actually access these areas even though they are not on campus. Okay, accommodation in certain facilities or subsidized accommodation in some of the identified accommodation facilities is actually very useful, especially for students who are affected by calamities and certain disasters. Again, I mentioned again the availability of meals, and of course, food establishments that can provide nutritious food for the students is helpful because it allows them to cope while they address the demands of being in a university. Those things are actually crucial now. In a VUCA world, what we want to also ensure is that the students' vulnerability is reduced as they cope with the challenges of being in a university.
Thank you very much, Sir Richard. That's a very good way, to end this webinar presentation. Now, Ate Isa, for the awarding.
Yes. Now, normally we would proceed to the presentation and awarding of certificates and tokens to our great guest speakers who have graciously provided us with their valuable expertise to conduct this webinar. Thank you so much to everyone. However, since various circumstances prevent them from receiving them physically, the certificates will be provided to them digitally, but we will still like to call on Mr. Mark Kevin Movillon, overall chairperson of the steering committee and the planning workshop, to present the certificates to be given to our guests. We also have here Vice Chancellor Janet De Silva, Assistant of the Vice Chancellor Jickerson Pinado, and Coordinator for Student Loans and Claims, Cicero Peña Flor, to present the certificates to our guest speakers.
Thank you very much, Ma'am Isa. I will read the citation. Certificate of Appreciation is awarded to for having served as a valuable resource speaker in the UPLB OSG Forge, future-ready opportunities and responsibilities for growth and empowered scholarships and grants in UPLB in the next normal. Webinar entitled Just Wanna Have Funds. The future of scholarships and grants in higher education institutions in the now normal. Held on the 3rd of June, 2022 at the Development Academy of the Philippines Conference Center and Hotel, Tagaytay City, Philippines. Given virtually this 3rd of June, 2022. Signed, G. Pilado, Director of the Office of Scholarships and Grants. This certificate is awarded to Christy Manette Smith.
Many thank you. Thank you.
The next certificate will be awarded to our very own big boss, no other than Assistant to the Vice President for Student Affairs and Director of the OSDS, our ever intelligent and humble AVP Richard Philip A. Gonzalo.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much for this opportunity.
And the next certificate, although unfortunately Sir Akim already had left, but we will still, of course, give him this certificate. The President of the International Affairs of Student Services, President Akim of Germany. President Akim, let's give him a big round of applause and virtual applause. Thank you.
All right. So thank you very much, Sir Mark, and thank you very much to everyone here present. Ladies and gentlemen, we extend a big thank you to for being with us here today in the first part of our day 2 activities. So OSG still has a lot of activities planned for the members who are present here, but for everyone who attended the webinar, thank you very much. Maraming salamat po at magandang umaga po. Ako po si Isabel Nadine Jimenez.
Before we play the UP Mahala, we would like to thank again Vice Chancellor Malata Silva, AVC Director G. Lado, AVP Richard, of course, Manager Christy, President Akim, and the whole OSG team and OVCSA team. This will not be possible if not for everyone around here. This is a great birthday presentation to our big boss as well. Again, thank you everyone and good job. Let's play the institution's beloved song. Thank you. Thank you very much. That officially ends our webinar, but our guest speakers, can you stay for a screenshot of the picture? Tech team, please take a screenshot. Apa, sahin lang kayo, sir. Sino magka-countdown?
Okay po, sige po. Let us all smile. I'll take the picture. 1, 2, 3. Another one. Smile po. 1, 2, 3. Okay na po.
Thank you. For our guest speakers, again, thank you very much. May we request your PowerPoint presentation to still upload it in the drives, and with your consent, if we can send it to all the participants, if there's no data privacy concern. And to all our participants, we will give you a recording of this video and all of the presentations. Again, thank you very much. Mabuhay. Take care, everyone. Stay safe and healthy.